All right, so let's get started on this class. So I'd like to welcome everybody to the lab in developmental and social psychology. This is the advanced lab. And what we're going to be doing today is just a welcome to the course overview of what you can expect in store this semester. So this will be your introduction to the course so that you know what to expect, how to navigate it, what we're going to be doing, just kind of prepare you for this upcoming semester. So what we're going to be doing is, some of you have had me before, we'll see in some of these. For others, it'll be new. So I'll introduce myself first, talk a little bit about the research that I do so that you get an idea of some of the possibilities of doing research in psychology. And then I'll talk about the Stigma-Free initiative that I'm a part of. And then we're going to turn the tables back on you and take a look at who is in this class and who is making up this advanced lab. So who are you? What's your interest in psychology? And what's your research project about? And then we'll finish up today's class with a course overview, course procedure, and then hit some syllabus highlights. So you can see the plan that I have for this advanced lab, where we're starting, where we're going to end up, and how we're going to get there. All right, so most of you will know this is just a brief refresher in case you forgot who I was over the winter break. But my name is Dr. Igor Yudichevich, and if you were wondering how to pronounce that, break it down. It starts with a U, followed by a reach, then you open up and say ah, and then there's a veach, and that little triangle there in mathematics is known as a veach. So it's Yudichevich on 3, 1, 2, 3. All right, yeah, I met with most of you before. I know you know how to do this, but anyways, just for completeness, there it is. And a lot of stuff in this course. This is the advanced lab, and I have a route map. I have a plan to get us from the beginning to the end, but that's not necessarily the path that this is going to take. So one of the things about research, the reason we do research is because we don't know what's going to happen. And much like that in this course, I have an idea of what's going to happen, and I know the general path we'll all take, but we won't necessarily all take that same path. So this is going to be a very important slide. When we meet, when you see me in the hallway, whatever it is, feel free. Dr. Yudichevich, I've been working on this, and I've run into this roadblock. Dr. Yudichevich, I'm signing up my subjects, and I have too many cancellations. Dr. Yudichevich, I've collected my data, but I have no idea what stats to do. Whatever we need to do, I'm your guide on this journey. This is kind of how you summon me. So just, keep that in mind as we go through this semester. So in terms of the research projects, I'm very pleased. In the initial discussions, we seem to have a wide variety of research projects. And I tend to do research projects on stuff that is often considered the outskirts of traditional psychology. So one of the things that I do is work on visual language. How do we understand pictures? How do we understand icons? How do we understand emojis? Basically, how do we understand pictures? And for those of you familiar with my research, you'll know that a lot of my recent research had to do with use of visual language in comic books. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of empirical work where I collected data to answer a question that I did not know about, but it was collecting data in what's known as a corpus analysis, which is one of your possibilities in this course. So when I'm talking about visual language, I'm talking about the structure of pictures, the grammar of pictures that are shared within our visual world that help us to understand what it is that an artist is trying to communicate. So just the same way that auditory language, spoken language has a grammar where you put the verb somewhere, you put the subject somewhere, you put the predicate somewhere, so too does visual language. And a nice example of that are these two covers here, where we can see the same structure being used to communicate the same idea in both of these pictures. So this is two different artists, but they both decided to draw the villain in a gigantic way in the picture. And this is part of the language. This means that the villain is important, that he's powerful, that they're going to be a large issue for our hero. And notice also that the heroes in both of these images, Daredevil here and Falcon over here, they're not in the center of the picture. They are placed asymmetrical in the picture. And that's visual grammar for saying that this person over here, or this thing here, is not quite like you and me. Because in our physical body, we have bilateral symmetry. In the natural world, most things have symmetry. So when things are asymmetrical, it kind of throws us off a little bit to let us know that both Daredevil and the Falcon have something special to do with them. So when I investigated visual language, one of the questions that I was interested in psychology was, how do we understand literal information and metaphorical information? Not just in pictures, but in general, right? How do we process that information? And I realized that I could answer that question and I could increase that knowledge in psychology by taking a look at comic book images. So for example, in this comic book image here, we have literal devices that show that the Flash is running fast. We have his arms and legs in a position, depicted in a position. This literally happens when you're running. This happens in the real world. So that's a literal device. He's leaning forward. That literally happens when you're running. That's a literal device. But he's got lines coming out from behind him. Those are known as action lines. That doesn't happen in the real world. Doesn't matter how fast you run. You're not going to have lines coming out the back of you. That's a metaphorical device. So what we did in this study was we did a corpus analysis where we took a look at 500 covers and determined what motion do they depict, and then what devices did the artists use in order to communicate that motion. And what we found was that artists will use as many literal devices as they want or as they can fit into a picture, but they will only use one metaphorical device. They won't use two. And the implication, the conclusion there, is that our minds, when we're looking at a picture, we can readily process literal devices and add that information together. But metaphors are processed differently. Metaphors are processed in a way where the first one adds information, but every other metaphor doesn't add anything. It doesn't differentiate anything. There's no additional processing going. So again, a question about how do our minds process literal information and metaphors, answered by taking a look at existing art. This was published in a peer-reviewed Comics Grid Journal of Comics Scholarship. Follow-up article published in the Journal of Graphic Novels and Comics. So it made that contribution to our understanding of metaphor and literal processing. On that same kind of vein, in terms of metaphors and literal devices, metaphors sometimes can be confusing. So if somebody is talking and they say something like, John has a heart of stone, there is a lot of things that your mind does to understand that sentence, right? So when somebody says John has a heart of stone, you understand that that's a metaphor, right? You don't all of a sudden have great concern for John and worry for John's health and think we got to rush John to the hospital because with a heart of stone, he's going to die, in a matter of seconds. You understand that, oh, you mean stone, not literally, metaphorically. You mean that he's cold, he's emotionless, right? That he's a hard, personality. That's what you mean. So that's one of the areas that people study in metaphors. How do we know what's a metaphor and what's literal? And that's another one that I tackled using comic book art. So here we have a pictorial device, gigantic size, and here's being used metaphorically. So Mockingbird here, she's a regular sized individual, and she's drawn here in gigantic size to metaphorically show that she is important, that she is powerful, that she is central to this story, that she is, a large part of this universe. So it's being used here as a metaphor. This same device of gigantic size is being used here literally. So Galactus, shown here, is literally a giant being that goes around the universe and eats planets, right? So he is literally a huge giant. So how is it when we're looking at these two pictures, do we decide, much like John has a heart of stone, that this is metaphorical? We're not going to find out in this story that Mockingbird drank a potion and grew to 50 feet tall. And this is literal. This is actually a literal giant. And what we found was that information in pictures can be, we divide it into contextual and structural. So contextual information is information that you bring, is context that you bring to the picture to understand it. So you might know who Mockingbird is, right? You read the title, you're like, oh, I recognize that uniform. That's contextual information. You might know about the sort of genre of comic book art. That's also contextual information. Other information is structural information. So for example, here, Mockingbird's legs all of a sudden just stop, right? We don't have the rest of Mockingbird here. That's an incomplete figure. Here we have a complete figure. Sure, he's obscured by clouds, but the information is that he's a complete figure. So structurally complete, structurally incomplete. And what we found was that your mind takes into account contextual and structural information, and it likes combinations, certain combinations, but it is very confused by one of the combinations. So I don't want to go into too much detail on that, but again, question about how we process information, psychology question answered by doing a corpus analysis by basically taking a look, I think it was like about 100 covers that depicted gigantic size. If you're interested in knowing more, that was published in the International Journal of Comic Art. And then the last one, to kind of show you an empirical study, was, and basically where research can take you, I wanted to know for metaphors, where do they come from? How do they originate? How do they spread through our language? So again, in spoken metaphors, somebody might say, you know, life is a journey. And all of us are like, oh yeah, I get it, life is a journey. And if you ask people, they'll recognize that. They'll be like, yeah, I've heard that before, life is a journey. How did that become a part of what we know? How did that become a part of our language? Visually, light bulb above the head. We all know what this means. This means she just had a great idea. But where did that come from? How did that spread through our language? How did we develop that understanding? So I took a look at that, not at the light bulb metaphor, but at a metaphor I identified called close-up eye asymmetry. So these are examples of close-up eye asymmetry. So here we have Storm in close-up, just the shoulders and the head. We got eye asymmetry, lightning coming out of one eye. She's got lightning all through her body. There is no reason for it to be coming out of one eye only. That was an artistic decision. Here we got Magneto, powers coming out of one eye. Here we got Peter from Harbinger, powers coming out of only one eye. You can do it with powers. You can do it with shading. You can do it with composition, for example, where you put a camera asymmetrical on the eye. This one is even more convincing because while a camera does have to be in front of your eye, if you're going to use the viewer, this skull could have been anywhere. And yet the artist said, I'm going to put it in front of that eye to create that asymmetry. And then also you can do it in various ways of composition. So this is a device that's used. This is like a saying in visual language that is used over and over again to communicate to the audience. It's also used in film. It's used in television. It's used outside of comic book art as well. And the analysis that we did, the study that we did, found that it actually had its origin with David Bowie, and it had its origin with the cover of Aladdin Sane. So Aladdin Sane here has close-up eye asymmetry. And what we did was we took a look at when did close-up eye asymmetry explode in its use in visual language. Turns out it exploded in the 90s. So in the 90s was when, with the covers that we were tracking, it had an uptick, it had an inflection point, it had an explosion in the use of this particular device. And then we took a look at when are artists at their most productive. Artists are at their most productive when they're in their mid-30s. Typically when you take a look at when did all the great artists paint their greatest, most well-known work, typically it's in their mid-30s. Then we took a look at when does an artist develop their style, when do they develop their kind of trajectory, and we discovered in developmental psychology something known as a crystallizing point or a crystallizing event. And a crystallizing event is an important event, an important exposure to something that happens to a child when they're in a very susceptible, critical period in their artistic development. And typically it's at about 9 to 13 years old. So we have an explosion in the 90s. We have 30 years 30-ish being typically the age where you're at your most productive. We got 30 years earlier, 20 years earlier, children are in their between 9 and 13 years old. 20 years before the 1990s, the mid-90s, around 1975. An image that came out around 1975, David Bowie's Aladdin Sane. So again, it's all converging evidence using psychology to show that this was the image that caused this spike in the use of this metaphor 20 years later. Now, definitely, this isn't the first time somebody put asymmetry on an eye, right? Anybody that ever painted a portrait of a pirate was going to have that eye patch, and it's not going to be on both eyes. But this was the event, and to my knowledge, this is the first time this was shown. This was the event that caused an explosion in the use of this device later on in our visual language. And if you're interested in that, you can read about Aladdin Sane and Closeup eye symmetry, once again in the Comics Grid, that Journal of Comic Scholarship. So I mentioned those three partly because they were all done using corpus analyses, meaning that they were all done without running a single subject. So contributions to psychology can be made, empirical contributions to psychology can be made without running a single subject. So as we're designing our experiments over the next coming weeks, I want you to keep that in mind. If you have a question and it can be answered without running any subjects, just know that you have that option. So I know that a lot of you want to run subjects. Absolutely fine. Have that as your, as your go-to plan. But just be aware that you can make substantial contributions to psychology simply by analyzing data, artifacts, and things that are made by humans that are already in existence, that are already there. All right. If you want to check out some of the stuff that my students will be doing, and if you want to know where some of your research is going to end up eventually, hopefully, I won't do it without your permission, but if you would like, you can check it out. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at @PaladinSane. You can also look for the hashtag Comic Book of Scientists. You can look for the hashtag Too Hard for Soft Science. I got a YouTube channel that has some of the presentations from the previous advanced lab on there, so you can kind of see what your previous colleagues were up to. But basically, you can poke around in there if you like to take a look at some of the other research that is done in my lab and has been done by people just like you, undergraduates that have worked with me in my Paladin Sane research lab. All right, a little bit more about me and then we'll turn to tables. The last thing I want to discuss, I discuss this in every single class, is the Stigma-Free Initiative. So the National Alliance on Mental Illness has a Stigma-Free Initiative. It's battling the stigma that surrounds mental illness. So a lot of people are embarrassed to admit that they have a mental illness. This keeps them from getting help for their mental illness or their mental disorder, and this is something that needs to be combated. Just the same way that somebody, when they break their arm, they will say, you know what, I broke my arm, I guess I got to go to the doctor. People never say, oh, no, my arm's not broken, it's totally fine. And when people are like, hey, is your arm broken? They're not like, oh, no, my arm is fine. Like, my arm is, if it's broken, go fix it. Mental illness is the same way. If there's an issue, there's an issue. There's no stigma to it, or there shouldn't be, and you need to go fix it. So one of the only ways to combat stigma is to throw a light on it. So as part of the Stigma Initiative, I just let my students know that I do battle with a mental illness. I battle with depression. And, I'm winning at this point, but it wasn't always the case. So to kind of give you a timeline and to kind of show you the light at the end of the tunnel, this was when I started IUSB back in fall of 2010. This was when I got diagnosed with depression in spring 2012. I wish I could say that it was a month before this that I realized, that I developed depression. Unfortunately, that's not the case. I was undiagnosed for years. And this is the big reason why I joined this initiative, because if there was no stigma attached, as soon as I started to develop these symptoms, as soon as I started to develop this disorder, I would have said, you know what, I need some help. And I would have had years treatment previously, but it is what it is. So I get diagnosed with depression in 2012, start cognitive behavioral therapy, start some pharmacological interventions, filled my last prescription in the spring of 2013. And again, I wish I could say that was it. I was cured, 100% better. But recovery is still ongoing. There's good days, there's bad days, there's steps forward, there's a step backwards, but it is getting better. And one of the ways that I know that it's getting better, and one of the things I like to promote to people is that when you get help, things do get better. So when I was suffering from depression, I just thought that was it. I just thought that was the way that I was, that this is just the way that it's going to be, that life just sucks and it's never going to get better. And that's one of the mindsets of depression. But it does get better. So one of the ways that they measure productivity as a psychologist is your publications. So peer-reviewed publications, non-peer-reviewed publications. When I was battling depression, I had one publication in 2012. They like for you to have about one a year. So I did not have that for the longest time. I finally squeezed one out in the fall of 2012. But then as my recovery started to swing into full motion, I had two publications in the spring of 2016. I had another one in the the fall of 2016. And then in the spring of 2017, I had another 5. And then in 2018, I had another publication, and I'm going to have another one in 2019 because we just submitted one. So it does get better, but you need to do something about it. So I highly recommend, if you think you might be suffering from a mental disorder, go talk to somebody. If you think you know somebody who is suffering from a mental disorder, go talk to them. And if you don't know how to start or you don't know what your first step would be, I'll make it easy. Come talk to me, and we'll figure out what to do. All right, so as you can see, a lot of different approaches, a lot of different topics. This is one of the more diverse advanced labs that I've ever had. But this is, just kind of give you a prequel of how this course is going to work. This is now your research community. This is now your sort of research family here. So it's good that we're familiar a little bit with what everybody is doing. We will have opportunities in this, during this course to kind of collaborate together. But just be aware that part of what makes the advanced lab an amazing experience is the sort of support that you all give to each other. So as we go through this, you'll get to know everybody a little bit better. You'll get to know their research projects a little bit better. You will have a direct influence on their research projects, and I'll get to that in just a bit. But just start to think of yourselves as, a nice research lab, a nice team here that is going to produce what sounds like some really important contributions to psychology that importantly would not be made if you were not here. So a lot of these studies that every study that I've discussed with so far is something that hasn't been done. Every study that I've heard about so far is something that's actually important to, understand. Some of them, are very topical, very sort of hot button issues. And again, this is important work that we're doing here. So keep in mind that beyond the course type of contribution that you'll make. And we'll also talk a little bit more about that as we go along. All right, so back to the course. So in the course, what the course overview is, what we're trying to do in this course, you already know, this is just review, is you're going to complete a research project. So from the start, coming up with a question, making the stimuli, designing the research methodology, to the middle, collecting your data, analyzing data, to the end, writing it all up, presenting it at a conference talk, at a poster presentation. We're going to do the entire life cycle of a research project from start to getting it out there. And it is important to note that in terms of new things that you will learn, most of the things you're going to be using in this course, most of the skills that you're going to be using in this course, you have already learned. So this is going to lean heavily on P211, P403. This is also going to lean heavily on your preliminary knowledge in the area that you've chosen. some of the background readings that you've done since we talked in the fall. But basically, I will be here to give you tips, to give you techniques, to kind of guide you on your way towards your research project. Everybody's experience is going to be a little bit different because everybody's project is a little bit different. But that is going to be the kind of gist of it. I'm going to be here as a guide, trying my best to help you navigate the weird and wonderful life of a research project. So what are you going to be doing? You're going to produce a novel empirical contribution to psychology. You are going to make psychology bigger by the work that you do here. And that's an exciting thing to be a part of. So in every other course that you've been in, when you took cognitive psychology, when you took personality psychology, at the end of that course, you ingested a lot of knowledge and you gave nothing back, right? Let's face it, you were a leech on psychology in those courses. This is your big chance now. This is your first opportunity to finally give back to psychology. So also keep that in mind. You know, when the going gets rough, when it's 11 o'clock at night and you're still working on one aspect of your IRB proposal, keep thinking to yourself that you are going to enrich and enlarge our understanding of psychology by the work that you're doing today. And that is a key thing in transforming you from a student into a full-fledged psychologist. So let's take a look at that journey that you're going to go on when you transform into your full-fledged psychologist. So I'm going to use the analogy or the metaphor of a board game here. So this is the game of life, or I'm going to turn it into the game of research. So this is where we're starting. This is where we're ending up. And you're starting, I'm going to put up a little bit less than what you're starting with. So let's assume that you're starting with nothing, right? Let's say that you just come here and you have no ideas. This is where you're starting. You're starting with more than that. Everybody here has a general idea. Everybody here has got some background readings, has been thinking about your problem. You have interest. Well, let's just say that that's where you're starting. This is where we want to end up. So one of the first things that you're going to do is going to go through the plagiarism certificate test and the ProProfs APA test. So I'm going to start posting links to these assignments in the very near future. Plagiarism certificate test, that's an IUSB plagiarism certificate test. If you've already completed it and you can find your PDF of your completion, that's awesome, fine, use that. I don't need you to do it every single time. If you haven't done it yet in one of your other courses, or if you can't find that certification, you'll need to go through it again. The ProProfs APA test, you've all gone through APA form. It's just a sort of refresher course, just so that we're back on track in terms of what's APA style. Topic paragraph and research hypothesis. This is going to be the first little piece of writing that you do. And this is just so that we can get solid on exactly what it is that your research is going to be about and what you hypothesize to find based on the background theories that you've looked at. So this is going to be your first sort of commitment to the project that you're doing, where you're sort of saying, I've thought about it, I've looked at these different possibilities. This is the one that I'm going to go with. And that's going to be one of the first things that you submit. Introduction draft. So we're going to do this a little bit differently than what I normally use when I write up my own research papers. But we're going to start off with an introduction draft. And you will submit that, and it will be peer reviewed by your fellow students in this class, by our research community. So this is going to be a theme that we're going to use over and over again in this course. You're going to be submitting drafts, and they're going to get peer reviewed. Peer review is a very powerful way to make scientific writing and scientific procedures better. It's a way to improve it. So every prestigious journal uses peer review. And whenever I hand in or submit a journal, it goes to the editor. And the first decision that is made, the editor decides whether or not it fits in the journal or it doesn't fit in the journal. So they kind of make a instant rejection or yes, we'll consider it decision. But then once they do that, it gets sent to 3 of my peers, 3 other psychologists in the field, and they read it and they comment on it. They review it. They tell me what is good. They tell me what needs improvement. They tell me what I missed. They tell me if there's any errors anywhere else. Then that gets sent back to me, and I use those comments and I use that feedback to improve my overall project. So we're going to be doing the same thing in this class. So you're going to hand in your introduction draft. You'll submit that, and then you will review drafts that were submitted by your peers in this class. And again, we're going to use that to increase the learning outcomes and increase the quality of everybody's research project. IRB Protocol. So the IRB Protocol, we're going to talk a lot about that. If you're running human subjects, you must do an IRB Protocol. And just to make sure that everybody has their project planned out correctly, even if you're not using human subjects, you will complete a IRB Protocol-like report that you will submit to me. So if you're doing actual, one of the great things about the IRB Protocol is that in order to submit this, you need to know exactly what you're going to do in your study. So this is a great kind of motivator to finalize all those little details. Know how many questions are going to be in your survey. Know how long you're going to be presenting your stimuli for. Get it all programmed into Qualtrics. If you're doing it face-to-face, get it all printed out and developed and basically made. It lets you it gets you very concretely required to figure out everything that you need to do. So if you're running human subjects, you will actually submit an IUSB IRB protocol off to get approved. And we'll go through exactly what information you need to provide and some of the best language to use to communicate what you're trying to do. And then if you're not using human subjects, so for anybody that is analyzing social media or analyzing databases that already exist out there, you will do an IRB-like protocol where basically you will provide the same information. So how is it that you're going to identify your source? What are the criteria that you're going to use to analyze it? What is your, how many blogs are you going to survey? Anything like that, you will do an IRB-like protocol. And that's a nice way, again, to make sure that we are solid on the methodology before we dive into actually doing the experiment. All right, so then once you have that IRB protocol, once you know what you're going to do, even before you collect any data or run any subjects, time for the method section. So once you know what you're going to do, then you can write up a method section. So once again, we'll have the method section draft, and that will be followed by the method section peer review, once again getting feedback from your colleagues in this class. After that, once we have the IRB approval, and if you're not requiring the IRB approval, once you get that approval from me that says, yes, this methodology seems sound, then you start collecting data, you start gathering your databases, you start running your subjects, and then eventually we'll need to analyze that data. So that's one of the commonalities for everybody in this class, regardless of your approach. Regardless of how it is that you're going to make your novel contribution, everybody's going to be analyzing data in some way. So we will spend some time in class to figure out what is the right statistical analysis for you. If it's a qualitative analysis that is required and it requires qualitative methods, we will go talk to Dr. Ritchie and we'll find out what to do because that's not my strong point. But whatever it is, whatever data you collect, it will need to be analyzed in order to answer your question, and that is going to go into your results section, the report, so that'll go in the results section draft. Once again, followed up by a peer review of your results section by people in this class. And the peer reviews are going to be run through Canvas. They will be completely anonymous. So I like using completely anonymous peer reviews. Now, they're not going to be as anonymous in terms of double-blind anonymousness as in my other classes because everybody's project is different. So you might be able to identify who wrote a method section based on what it was that their methodology included. You might be able to know who did a results section if, who did a methodology section if in the subject line it said we tested, 16 dogs. We're all going to know who that is. But the reviewers will be completely anonymous. And I do this because sometimes when you're reviewing a paper, you have to be, it's not even cruel, I hesitate to use that phrase, but you got to be cruel to be kind. So when I do peer reviews in my class, I grade the drafts on a very sliding scale of grading. So I don't expect 100% finished, polished writing when you do your first draft. That's why you do a draft, so that you can put it out there. It's the best you can do. It's not going to be perfect. I understand that. So I will grade your drafts irrespective of what anybody says in your peer review. So if you need to come down on somebody in their peer review, if you need to tell them this paragraph that you wrote is confusing, and I don't understand at all what you mean by, post-synaptic uptake. It was, it was missing sentences, or I don't know. Whatever it is, the feedback that you need to do, feel free and feel that responsibility to your fellow students to give them that honest feedback, because that's what's going to make their final product the best that it can be. And again, we're looking at passing this course and potentially going beyond, getting a publication somewhere, getting a presentation somewhere. And that only occurs if people give you honest feedback and help you improve your product. So we'll talk more about peer review as it comes along. But you'll notice that since we are doing it for every single draft, clearly it's something that is very important and very effective at increasing the quality of your research project. All right, discussion draft. You will also later on, once we kind of know what the results are, we're going to figure out what does it all mean. And that goes into your discussion section, and that's followed up by discussion section peer review. Once we have all those, you'll notice that by then you'll have your intro written and you'll get feedback, methods written, you'll get feedback, results written, you'll get feedback, discussion section, you'll get feedback. At that point, it's time to take all your feedback, put it all together, fix up everything, and you will hand in your research paper draft. So you're going to have your research paper draft handed in, and then should be no surprise here. Oh, that's a surprise for me. But you're going to have your research paper peer reviews. So you'll notice here that you are going to have 3 opportunities to improve your writing, right? So the initial peer reviews, that's chance number 1. So you improve your writing once after the first peer reviews. Then you hand in your research paper peer review. Sorry, you're going to have 2 chances to improve your writing. That's chance number 2. So you start off with your first draft. You do the best that you can. You get your reviews on your sections. You improve it the best that you can. You put it all together. You get your reviews on your research paper. You then improve that the best as you can so that you can come up with that final, where'd you go? Final research paper, the finished version. All right. This is done in terms of dates, not in terms of the natural progression. I'm going to fix that next time. Okay, a couple of things that we skipped over. IRB closeout report. Not a big deal, but I did want to put it on the screen there. Once you finish your study, you need to fill out a short little form. You send it to the IRB, and you basically say, I'm done. I ran this many subjects. Nothing went wrong. Here's my official closeout report. And that's all that it is. It's just part of the course requirements. That's why I got it up there. All right, conference talk presentation. I have students give an oral presentation of their work. So you will be giving an oral presentation. You will be standing up in front of an audience with a PowerPoint presentation, talking about your research, talking about what you found, talking about your research project. One thing that is true about research in general, and psychology research in particular, is that if nobody ever sees your research, you have really made a very small contribution, maybe not a contribution at all. So you could be sitting on the biggest psychological breakthrough of this century. You could be sitting on the most important and profound psychological discovery that the world has ever known. And if nobody knows about it, it's not helping anybody. So one of the key things that we're going to develop in this class is how to communicate what you found effectively, how to get it out there. And a lot of our goals are going to be pushing towards doing the research and then getting it out there. So all of this stuff at the beginning is doing the research well, where we're going to handle the methodology, we're going to handle the ins and outs of how to design a study. And then the back half of this is all getting it out there. So the reason I have so many peer reviews opportunities is so that once you have your finished paper, it's going to be something that people want to read. And there are cases in the history of psychology, and I'll tell you one right now, Deese, 1959, where Deese was a researcher, and he discovered false memories in 1959. And his article, I'll upload this in the Canvas so you can see it. If you were part of my P471 class, you know what I'm talking about. He discovered false memories in 1959. His article was so poorly written that it was ignored for decades, right? So for decades, people did not discover this pioneering work that this researcher did on false memories. It wasn't until 1995, I believe, that Roediger and McDermott forced themselves to work through Deese's paper and said to themselves, oh my goodness, this is amazing. You know what we should do? Exactly this study and a follow-up study to it. And they did it. They wrote it well. They published it. And all of a sudden, psychologists were like, oh my gosh, false memories. Oh my goodness, we never knew memories work this way. And then people in therapy, who were dealing with, if you remember that there was an issue maybe 10, 15 years ago where therapists were recovering repressed memories and people were accusing their parents of sexually abusing them, and people were accusing relatives and friends of abusing them as children. And the idea was that the abuse repressed this memory. And now the therapists have brought that memory out, and this is why they have the issues that they have. That repressed memory was shown in a lot of times to be a false memory. And it was a false memory because the therapist was providing the cues and the context, and your mind naturally fills in the details. And a lot of these people were misremembering, and it's a vivid memory. They had high confidence in it, but they were misremembering a memory that never actually occurred. This phenomenon and this issue of repressed memories destroyed many, many lives and destroyed many, many families and many, many relationships for things and accusations that never actually occurred. It wasn't until Roediger and McDermott came around that psychologists were like, oh my gosh, these could be false memories. Oh my goodness, this is how our memory actually works. So think about all the families that could have been saved, the lives that could have been saved, the trauma that could have been avoided if Deese had written his paper better and people in 1959 read it, because scientists are humans too, right? We don't want to slog through a horrible paper. People actually read it and understood it. It would have advanced psychology by decades. So writing is very important to get your message out, to contribute to psychology. Presentations are very important as well. So I'm going to encourage, and this course is set up to get you prepared to present at the Undergraduate Research Conference. So this is a research conference that we have here at IUSB every single spring. And I'm going to highly encourage and highly promote it. And hopefully everybody here will present at the URC for one reason, because I think everybody's project here will fit into the URC. And the second thing is that is one of the first ways that you can actually get your research out into the public and get your research out into a platform where people can hear about it. Because again, if you have that great contribution to psychology, but you're walking around like this with it, it's like, no, don't look at my contribution. You're not helping anybody. But as soon as you're like, hey guys, check this out, and people start reading it, and people start viewing it and start understanding it, that's where your contribution multiplies. All right, so we're going to have a conference presentation. If for some reason you cannot present at the URC, there's a backup oral presentation, and we'll talk a bit about that as we get closer to that as well. And then finally, the last thing we're going to do on the last day of class, we're going to have the poster session. So you've probably seen these outside in the hallways. You'll be sitting in front of a printed out poster of your study, and you are going to be telling anybody that comes by, faculty from psychology, sometimes the dean comes by, other students that want to see what they're in for when they do their advanced lab, other passerbys that are just interested, you're going to be presenting to them during that poster session. And then once that's all done, what I'm hoping is that we can take the work that's been done in this advanced lab and actually get your research published in a published article. So the last time that I did the event, well, it was the senior seminar, but the last time that I did the research capstone course, I actually founded a journal called the Journal of Cognition and Diversity, and it's online, it's published. I can give you the links if you like, but it was a peer-reviewed publication that students in the class were able to produce using their research. So that is, in my mind, the end goal for all of you here. I want all of you, when you finally get to that final research paper, to be able to take that paper and get it published in either the Journal of Cognition and Diversity, or I have a backup plan for those of you that don't fit into that particular journal. But again, that's what we're looking for, a published article, something that is out there for people to read, for people to research, something that is out there so that when somebody is interested in your area of psychology and they search on Google, up pops your article and you make your contribution. All right, so that's the roadmap, and we're going to try to stick to that as much as we can. Course procedure, we'll go through this a little bit more quickly because we're running a little bit behind time. But all course content open to discussion, especially in this course. This is a capstone course. Again, different people are going to take different roads, so let me know what you need to know about. Ask your questions, and just get ready to be wrong a majority of the time before you find the right way to do something. So in research, a lot of times, the experiments that I think are going to work don't work at all. And the experiments that I think don't have a chance end up being amazing. You know, my David Bowie project, I went in there completely expecting to fail and ended up with one of my favorite pieces of research ever. And you have no idea. That's why it's an experiment. That's why it's research. So don't worry if you have to change things, revise things, move things around, switch things up. That's just the way research is. We're all trying to answer that question and get to that end goal. In terms of contact, there's the information for contact. Use Canvas messages. Everything that you need in terms of lectures, course information, and announcements will be available in Canvas. I'm going to start uploading some of the links that you need for example, the plagiarism test and the APA test. Use Canvas messages. I'm going to try my best to do a 24-hour turnaround on those when you need to communicate with me. For the required readings, the journal articles that you're finding, those are your required readings. So we want to get as many of these as you need to get the background information on your topic, as many of them as you need to discover techniques and methodologies that psychologists are using to answer questions like yours, not your question, but questions like yours. So do those background readings, get those required readings. They're going to be different for everybody, depending on your project. And what I recommend is if you still have your APA manual lying around, dig it out, because we will be writing in APA style. If you have APA style in a resource somewhere else, dust it off, because the final research paper will be in APA style. In terms of the syllabus, we went through most of this. There will be class participation and attendance points, so make sure that you're showing up to class. Most of this we went through on the roadmap. So a couple of things. A couple of things that I wanted to mention before we adjourn for the day. In terms of grading, There's a standard breakdown for the grade. That's where it all comes from. There are no exams. There are no midterms. There's no tests in this. This is about starting and ending a research project. So that's where all your points come from. And as you can see, it's pretty spread out, except for, again, the final products. So the research paper, your final version, is going to be worth 20%. Your conference talk presentation, 15%. Your poster presentation, 10%. So that kind of reflects the importance of getting your information out there. In terms of electronic devices, if you need to take a phone call, if you need to answer a text, feel free to step outside for a moment. So let's make sure that we're all on task and performing in this class, working towards our research project. But the second last thing that I'll mention is this is a new kind of pilot project that I'm testing this semester. So there is bonus opportunity for points towards your final grade. So up to 10% bonus towards your final grade in social media professional development. So most of you are either going to graduate at the end of this semester, or you're going to come back in the fall and graduate at that time. So it's time to start thinking about the next step. It's time to start thinking about the next stage of your career. And one thing that's occurring these days more than ever is that social media is becoming more and more important to the professional. So when I published my first article in the Comics Grid, a couple of days later, I got an email from the editor, and they asked me, do you have a Twitter account? Because somebody's criticizing your article on Twitter. And I did not have one, so that's the only reason I got a Twitter account, only to find out that so many researchers and psychologists communicate with each other and have these networks and these communities created on these social media platforms. So we want to make sure, number one, that we can get you into a part of that, so we can get you plugged into these communities, so you're part of these, larger research networks. And we want to make sure, number two, that you are developing your social media presence, not so that you can have millions of followers or be a social media influencer. That, down the line, maybe for, who knows. But importantly, for that next step, that you have a social media presence that indicates that you are a serious psychologist and with, evidence to back it up. So you don't want to go into a job interview or to apply to a grad school, and when they Google you and see your Twitter feed, all they see is your outfit of the day and your trip to, the Bahamas and your, your 140 character review of Black Panther, right? That's not what is going to impress them. What they want to see is that you're engaged in psychology, that you have this professional presence. So what we're going to be doing throughout this class is we're going to help you to develop that professional presence. If you already have it, great, we'll add on to it. If you don't, this is going to be where we started. But that's going to be optional. That's just a bonus opportunity. So that will be rolling out as we go through the semester. All right, so I'm going to leave you to review some of the other stipulations in the syllabus on your own. Just one last thing that I want to mention. We'll pop this up here. All right, so this is the class schedule in the syllabus that's available. It's pretty standard. It will let you know what we're doing and when we're doing things. So next class when we meet, we'll be taking a look at developing hypotheses, modeling research, basically coming up with that finished research question. In a week, how to write your introduction, some intro to research methodology, and then we'll finish up on research methodology by January 17th. This column over here lets you know what things are due on that particular day. So when it says due, and I'll send out an announcement about this, it is due at midnight the day before. So your plagiarism certificate test and your ProProfs APA test, it is due January 14th at 11:59 p.m. And that's just my way of making sure that people aren't doing it 5 minutes before class and then coming late to class and all that kind of stuff. So anyways, just be aware that it's due the midnight before. And we will, go along and, bring out things as they go along and develop as, as it progresses. IRB protocols, how to do that. And then your IRB protocols do writing your method section. How do we do that? But then there are going to be these days here where it's going to be meet with instructor as needed. And these are going to be the days where basically you might need a little bit of step to finish that, or a little bit of time to finish that next step. Or for example, you might be collecting data. So these will be weeks that we won't have anything scheduled to occur during class. So when you see these meet with instructor as needed days, there still might be something due that day. So your method section draft is still coming in at that time. But we're not going to meet here in class. Rather, I'm going to be available in my office hour during class time. So again, this is, if you're progressing on your project and you hit a stumbling block or you hit a roadblock, this is when there's that little bit of extra time for you to come in and meet with me if needed. If everything is going great and you don't need to see me, feel free, not to do that. Spring recess. Thank goodness. Okay, and then the last thing that I want to make sure that everybody's aware of, the Undergraduate Research Conference is on a Friday, and that's April 12th. So again, this is going to be your first opportunity to get your research out there. And I, as I mentioned before, uploaded some of my previous classes presentations at the URC up on my YouTube channel. I'm not killing it in terms of subscribers, but again, there were clicks, there were views, there were people coming to that, seeing the work that they've done, and taking from that their, contribution to psychology. So I highly recommend it, can't recommend it enough, that you take that first step in going from that consumer student to that producer psychologist by presenting at the Undergraduate Research Conference. However, it is on a Friday. So I understand that some people might have a schedule that just does not allow them to go on a Friday. If you got a work schedule, if you have, whatever your life situation is. So if that's the case, if you absolutely cannot come to the URC, we are going to have time for presentations on the 9th and the 11th. And also, if you are presenting at the URC, but you want to do a dry run, right? You want to try it first. That'll also be the days where I'm going to reserve time in order to do that. So keep that in mind. Again, I highly encourage everybody to present at the URC. And we will go through, if you're at all worried, we will go through how to present at the URC. So there are times here where we're going to talk about conference talk presentations. How do you start it? What information do you put in the middle? How should you end it? What should your visuals look like? What's a good way to organize your PowerPoint slides? What's a bad way to organize your PowerPoint slides? We'll go through dealing with questions. I know a lot of students are really worried. What if they ask me this? What if they ask me that? There are specific techniques that I sound like clickbait. There are 8 specific techniques for how to answer a question. Number 6 will amaze you. But anyways, there are techniques for how to answer a question that'll get you out of any situation so that you don't have to have any anxiety about what questions might be thrown at you. And we'll go over that. So we will get you hyper ready to present at these conferences. So if you're at all worried about speaking in public, don't be. And just kind of give you 2 last kind of confidence boosters for the Undergraduate Research Conference. My students at the Undergraduate Research Conference, every single year, either win best presentation or win honorable mention for best presentation. So I have sent students to the Undergraduate Research Conference, I think like 7 years in a row. And one of my students always comes home with the best presentation or an honorable mention. So we will get you prepared for that Undergraduate Research Conference. Last little piece of confidence boosters. I went to a conference on the Empirical Association for Aesthetics. It was up in Toronto. I presented, 2 of my former students presented some of the work that we collaborated on. And this was an aesthetic conference. a conference about the psychology of art. And at the end of our symposium, so at the end of our 3 presentations, one of the first people that asked a question went out of the way to mention that they really appreciated that we took visual design into account. So your presentations will look amazing. Don't worry about that, we'll get you there. But we will get you ready for it. And again, this is your chance to go to the world and say, hey, check it out. Here's what I did. There you go. There's my contribution. So plan on it if you can, and we'll be doing that. All right, other than that, that's basically what I want. Whoops. That is basically what I wanted to cover for today. Where's my nice... There it is. All right, so that's basically what I wanted to cover for today. So continue with your work, continue with your background research. Again, the more you can get done as we're gearing up, the more, the greater your project is going to be at the end. So keep doing the work that you're doing, get those articles in, make those notes, start thinking about it. Next class when we meet, we're going to take a look at how to go through your background information, find those theories, make your research predictions, basically how to do your topic paragraph and your research hypothesis. Other than that, we are done for today.